The 2018 cartoon animation movie opens up in beautiful spring weather, with thousands of birds spreading their wings across the air and flying through the white clouds. It's spring, and the birds return to their spring homes to survive the season. Plovers, a type of bird species, fly together to their spring home, while a vulture named Shadow stands to watch waiting for a target. Plovers never fly alone and are always led through the sky by their leader, a plover named Daddy. While the plovers hover in the air, two vultures on land talked about how much they hated spring because the birds always take over the entire place. But the only thing they like about spring is the fact that they stop being the lunch target for the vulture named Shadow. Shadow spots the birds flying in the sky and his eyes beam with excitement. He sends for his decoy, another vulture named Skewer. The plovers always fly behind a stronger bird specie named Sterna, so Shadow uses Skewer to distract the Stern while he goes after the plovers. Just as Shadow planned, the Sternas run after Skewer, so he seizes the opportunity to go after the plovers. Daddy realizes the Sternas had fallen for Shadow's decoy, and so he instructs the other plovers to stay on their guard. Unfortunately, one of them gets captured by Shadow. The birds finally land on Earth in their spring home, but Daddy wasn't happy because Shadow took one of them away, so his wife named Mummy tries to console him. She tells him not to feel bad as he did his best by training them on how to fight and avoid Shadow's grip, otherwise they would have lost more than one of them to Shadow. Daddy felt better, and they looked at their net which they left last spring and realized they will have to do a lot of spring cleaning. But before the cleaning, Daddy requested a dance instead. After the dance, they watched their egg hatch. The little hatchling cracked up a little and then it rolled out of the nest. It cracked again and rolled into a rock, then the baby plover inside shyly opens up the shell. His parents were delighted to see him, and then finally, he breaks out of his shell. His parents watched him with happiness on their faces. The little plover is named Ploey. Like the head of every other family, Ploey's dad goes out to fetch food. Soon after, he returns with worms hanging on his beak. After they ate, Daddy takes Ploey with him along to teach him how to dig for worms. On their way, Ploey asks his father questions about their kind and he answers them. Ploey meets a new friend called Ploeviria while at the river digging for worms. Ploeviria is a young bird who is a plover just like Ploey. Ploey's dad soon returns to the river with Mother, and he tells her Ploey had found a lover as they watch Ploey run off with Ploeviria. The two little birds dig for worms together under a downpour. At night, Ploey's father bids the family goodbye as he goes to stand guard on the night. While on guard standing on a pole, Skewer, Shadow's decoy, calls out to Daddy and he tells Daddy of Shadow's attack plan. At first, Daddy doesn't believe him, but after hearing Skewer say he was going to run away, he does. Play, who had come out to look for his father, goes to him and holds onto his leg in fear as he sees him talking to Skewer. Daddy bids Skewer goodbye and then he scolds Ploey for leaving his mother's side and roaming around. Then he takes him back to his mother. The next morning, Ploey and Ploeviria go out playing in the field. After some time, their mothers come to take them to flying school, while Daddy and some other birds were at the sea setting traps for Shadow. At flying school, a group of young birds whose leader is interested in Ploeviria talks down on Ploey. Ploeviria defends Ploey and introduces him to them as her flying mate. The instructor uses a stone to give them an illustration of what happens to any bird that fails to fly. They all head to the top of a rock, high above the water, and fly in groups. Ploeviria was among the first group and then she did excellently well. Ploey was with the next group, but he was too afraid to flap his wings. After the others flew back to the ground, Ploey finally gathered the courage he needed. Back at the sea, Daddy spots Shadow from a distance and instructs the plovers with him to get the net trap ready. He flew into the sky and tries to lure Shadow into the trap, but Shadow manages to escape. All the birds run around in fear. Shadow flew away and Daddy goes after him. They both sighted Ploey from a distance, but Shadow was faster and he grabs Ploey with his feet. However, Daddy fights with him until he lets go of Ploey. Shadow captures Daddy instead. Then Ploey lands in the river and screams out for his father. Hours later, Ploeviria visits Ploey. She finds him in the arms of his mother, and she tells Ploeviria he had refused to eat or talk. Ploeviria tries to get Ploey happy again and decides to take him out for a walk. They went back to the top of the rock again so Ploey can learn to fly. Ploeviria flies first and screams out to Ploey to fly too, but then a big cat appears behind Ploey. Ploeviria shouts at Ploey and asks him to jump, but he was too scared to, so he runs instead. The cat chases after him and catches him. Ploeviria returns to Ploey's mother trembling in fear and tells her about it. The cat takes Ploey inside a house, but the house owner chases the cat away. Ploeviria sits outside on a rock in the evening, sobbing in sadness. The plover who likes her comes to her and tells her to forget about Ploey, but she gets mad and walks out on him instead. The next morning, Ploey wakes up in a bird cage inside a house with the cat sleeping on the bed. Some birds, who were the town's announcers, announces the change of weather for the birds and instruct them it was time to fly south as winter has arrived. Chloe sees his family fly south and calls out to them, but they couldn't hear him. But his shouting woke the cat up. The cat tries to grab him, but Chloe manages to escape and runs out through the window. He slides down through a pipe and runs away. He returns to his nest and lays in it while he spoke to his father's feather. The wind blew the feather from his hand and he runs after it. As he chases after it, he runs into a group of birds, and then he asks them for the direction to Paradise Valley, a place he heard Skewer tell his father about the night he was on watch. They explained to him and Chloe set out on a course for Paradise Valley. As he goes on his journey, he suddenly feels too cold and decides to take shelter under a rock. After a while, he continues. He sights a bird in the sky and thinking it is Skewer, he calls out to it. But unfortunately, it was Shadow. Shadow spots him and tries to go after him, but Chloe manages to escape. He hides underneath something which he didn't know was the wings of a bird. The bird was hiding not because it was afraid of Shadow, but because it wants to sneak up on Shadow and catch him. After talking with Chloe, the bird leaves him and continues on his journey. The night falls on Chloe, and as he continues walking, he notices Shadow's presence, so he hides in a cave close by. He goes out to check again after Shadow had left, and then it felt like he saw Shadow again, so he fearfully runs back into the cave. The next morning, the bird named Gyron wakes up and finds Chloe sleeping next to him. He immediately kicks Chloe out of the cage, and Chloe gets covered in snow. They both argue and bicker for a while. Then Chloe explains to Gyron that the only reason he slept in his arms was that he thought he was a warm patch of snow. Gyron tells Chloe that his color makes it hard for Shadow to spot him and advises Chloe to get himself a camouflage too, as his color will make it very easy for him to be spotted by Shadow. But Chloe refuses his suggestion and keeps walking instead. An idea comes to Gyron, and he then offers to help guide Chloe to Paradise Valley. As the two walk on their journey, they exchange pleasantries. Chloe walks closely next to Gyron in the chilly snow, then he heads to Candiceries to touch it, but Gyron stops him instead. They see a footprint made in the snow. Gyron recognizes it to belong to the fox, and he advises Chloe to stay clear of the fox's path, and then they continued walking until they climbed to the top. Gyron blocks the sun ray with his wing, but then the sun shines through a hole in his feather. Chloe was amazed by the hole and gasped in astonishment. Gyron notices and explains to Chloe that he got the scar from a human. He shows Chloe the materials that he had gathered to use in capturing Shadow. He tells Chloe everything was set and all that was left was a decoy, and asks Chloe to be his decoy, but Chloe runs off, refusing to be his decoy. The two argue again and split up. As the night approached, Chloe felt cold and he calls out to Gyron, but when he got no response, he runs to him. He finds Gyron fast asleep and he tells him he was going to run around to warm himself up. As Chloe ran around, he heard someone scream for help. He runs to find out who it was, and then he finds a mouse caught up between ice and water. The mouse asks him to help bring his stick, and he helps the mouse get his stick, and the mouse crosses over with it. The mouse thanks Chloe and returns to his family. As Chloe tries to go back to Gyron, the ice on which he stood breaks off and sailed to the waterfall. Just as Chloe was about to fall off, Gyron comes to his rescue. Gyron scolds Chloe for offering to help the mouse and reminds him that everyone is responsible for their survival. He yells at Chloe for trying to help, and then he takes Chloe into his arms to help keep him warm. They search for shelter to sleep for the night and finally sit on a rock close to a cave together. Gyron tells Chloe about his sons and how he lost them to Shadow and promises to get his revenge. Chloe in return tells Girth that Shadow took his dad too. Gyron points at the sky and tells Chloe everyone they loved whom they have lost is in the sky and always goes with them. He sings Chloe to sleep. Unknown to them, the fox was sleeping in the cave and it suddenly woke up and sneak-a-deep on them. Then he grabs Gyron away. Chloe falls from the rock and calls out to Gyron as he got back on his feet. He picks up Gyron's shell and runs after them. He gets to a point and stops running. He calls out for Gyron but gets no response, so he blew air into the shell instead. As he did, he notices something crawling underneath the snow. He got scared as there were many of them and they surrounded him. His fears disappeared when he saw it was the mouse and his family. The mouse tells Chloe he had come with his family to thank him. They all thanked Chloe, and then Chloe tells them he needs to find the fox. Inside the cave, the fox smashes some leaves between two stones and rubs them on Gyron, who was laying unconscious on a flat and bigger stone. He was getting ready to feast on him. The mouse and his family climb on each other and form a shape of a female fox. They used it as a decoy to distract the fox, and it works. The fox paused his cooking preparation and walks to the entrance to see the female fox. They run off and then Chloe runs inside the cave. The fox runs after Chloe, but he meets another mouse inside the cave who teases him and runs away. The mouse makes the fox run around the cave in circles while Chloe tries to wake Gyron up. He finally gets Gyron to stand and then he takes him out of the cave. The fox catches the mouse, and right when he was about to feast on it, the rest of the mouse comes after the fox and saves it. The mouse bids Chloe and Jiren goodbye at the cave's entrance and then returns to keep the fox busy buying them time to run away. Jiren gives up on walking and decides to take a nap. Chloe goes out in search of food to help Jiren get back on his feet. As he searched for food, the weather became even more chilly. He finds his way into a cave at the top of a high mountain. He sees a nest and decided to take a nap inside. As he tries to sleep, he hears footsteps and then he sees it was Shadow. He overheard Shadow talking and when he looks he realizes it was his wife. He tries to escape as fear grips him, then he misses his step and a bone falls off, making a sound. He crawls back into the nest to hide, but then the feathers in it make him sneeze, causing Shadow to see him. Chloe runs outside and almost falls off the mountain. He held onto a rock with one of his hands, and Shadow grabs him and tries to eat him, but then Jiren shows up and pushes Shadow. He frees Chloe and then uses his feet to push Jiren into the cave. Some of the explosives that Jiren carried with him fell off and Chloe manages to take one. As Shadow held Jiren hostage, Chloe throws one of the explosives and it blows the place up, causing him and Jiren to fall off. As they land on the snow, Jiren decides to give up on the journey and tells Chloe to go on without him. Chloe continues on the journey just as Jiren has asked him to. He sees an ice pool and as he looks at it, he imagines Ploeviria together with the plover who is interested in her. He gets angry at them, but then he wakes up to realize it was his imagination. He sleeps through the night and continues his journey the next morning. He finally reaches the mountain close to Paradise Valley, but he couldn't carry on any longer, then he decided to give up as well. As he does, the wind becomes stronger. However, he tries to walk through the storm. Jiren's shell, which he carried with him, slips from his hand. He tries getting it, but he was too lazy to move, so he gave up on it. The wind blew into the shell, causing a noise to come from it, and a deer shows up. The deer finds Chloe and picks him up and takes him to Paradise Valley. The deer explains to the other animals that he had heard Jiren's horn and thought it was Jiren, but when he followed the sound of the horn, he found Chloe instead. The mouse whom Chloe saved was there with them and he recognized Chloe. Skewer, who was also there, recognizes Chloe as well. The animals at Paradise Valley try to revive Chloe back to life. They gave him a hot bath and performed CPR, but he doesn't wake up. Giving up on him and believing he was dead, they decided to bury him. As they carried him, Chloe coughs and then he wakes up. They all get excited and threw him in the air. They ask Chloe about Jiren and he tells them Jiren gave up on the way. Skewer notices sadness in his voice and tells Chloe to be happy he survived. They decide to throw a welcome back party for Chloe. They stand in a line and pass ingredients to one another until it gets inside the pot as they cooked a feast. The celebration doesn't end with the meal, as they go on to have a very hot and relaxing bath which they needed in the chilly weather, after which they sat around a campfire laughing and talking, and then they listened to one of the animals entertain them with a song. The mouse gives Chloe a massage to help ease the stress of his journey. After the celebration, they all lay their back on the floor, and as they did, the flower sprouted out. The animal next to Chloe tells him spring was coming and once the sun rises, spring will arrive. Chloe becomes worried as he thought about the safety of Ploeviria and his family in the hands of Shadow. He urges the animals to go back with him to defeat Shadow once and for all, but they are all too scared to and refuse to go with him. He sits alone and then one of the animals comes to talk to him. He decides to be courageous and learn to fly. So he climbs up a mountain and for the first time, he flies. Excited about his ability to fly, he flies to the animals and asks them to go with him again. But they refused, so he goes alone. As the birds arrive, Shadow stands waiting for them as usual. The plover, who likes Ploeviria, flies to her and tries to flirt with her, but she orders him to stand in line. The plover sights Shadow, and the moment he does, he chickens out and flies away in fear. They all try to save themselves, but Shadow gets Ploeviria. Chloe comes to rescue her and Shadow goes after him instead. As he tries to fly away from Shadow, Chloe sees Jiren, and then together they try to catch Shadow. They tried all the tricks they had, but Shadow escapes every one of them. Ploeviria decides to help them out, and this makes Shadow confused as he got distracted. They make him smash his head across a giant bell and he falls into a pit that has been dug and gets covered with sand. The birds celebrate their victory, but then Shadow comes out again. Jiren, who is on a roof above them, jumps down and pushes Shadow back into the pit, and then a great amount of sand covers him up finally. The plovers gather together waiting for the young plovers to return. They anxiously watch Jiren walk towards them, and as they sight Chloe and Ploeviria in front of him, they become excited. Chloe flew into the embrace of his mother. As his mother welcomes him, he sights Jiren walking away. He flies to meet him and asks him where he was going. Jiren tells him he is returning to Paradise Valley, and Chloe asks to tag along, but Jiren declines and tells him to go after Ploeviria instead. Chloe flies to Ploeveria, who was standing on the side of the river where they met for the first time. He shyly greets her and tells her he understands if she is with someone else now because she thought he was dead. Ploeveria softly touches his shoulder as he walked away. She compliments him for learning how to fly, and then she asks him to catch her. The two lovebirds then fly together in the sky. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this.